Israel is on high alert after a series of attacks on troops and civilians by Palestinians. The Israeli military is deploying 300 soldiers on the streets of Jerusalem to help police maintain order in the city after weeks of unrest. Tony Grant is a freelance American journalist who lives in Israel. We just heard today that they're going to ban tomorrow Muslim men who are younger than 40 from the Al-Aqsa mosque, from this complex that's sacred
the Temple
to.
Mount.
So the crackdown continues in Israel. I'm wondering, when you're walking the streets there, is there palpable tension? Do people who live there feel on guard all the time now?
I would say the short answer to that question is no. But if you're in Jerusalem, which is always a city where there is a certain level of tension because you have so many holy sites to so many religions, it's kind of tense to begin with. And so now what you're seeing is an escalation of tension because of the recent wave of attacks that are in the Jerusalem area.
And here in the same city, you have Jewish neighborhoods and you have Arab neighborhoods, but that means you have people from different sides of this conflict interacting in the same city.
And Christian as well, it should also be said. I mean, the old city of Jerusalem, which does fall within what we could call East Jerusalem, is an extremely historic part of the world, really. There are sites that are, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is there, the Jesus heritage. It doesn't get much more intense than that.
And by the way, these are all sites that tourists want to see when they're coming to Jerusalem, when they're visiting Israel. It's the Holy Land. Of course they want to go there.
Right, and they still are. I mean, the tourism numbers, from what I've seen so far, may have dipped a little bit, but basically pilgrims, religious tourists are still coming to Jerusalem. There is a beefed up presence. Some might call it a de facto blockade of East Jerusalem. It may be in progress as we speak, but what it really means is increased security checkpoints.
How can that be safe for tourists if the Jerusalem mayor is saying to his citizens, if you have a gun permit, carry your weapon?
That is true. There's no denying the uptick in violence has led to statements like that, which amongst Israelis is something that I think is going to be debated hotly. Because although we're used to seeing images of Israeli soldiers walking around with guns, usually those are actually not even armed when they're off the base.
Loaded.
And of course, the mayor of Jerusalem is talking about civilians arming themselves, much as, say, Second Amendment lovers in this country would choose to arm themselves. So that's a separate debate, I think.
The other thing is, when we're talking about this, it's often pointed out about the mandated military service that Israeli residents go through. If you have an armed citizenry, are they likely to be more weapons savvy than people who live in other parts of the world and never serve in the military?
Again, I think it's a tough decision, a tough call, because the military service, it's mostly, young men and women, 18 to 20 or 21, something like that. And they do have, of course, rigorous military training. But I think it's quite separate from the issue of should civilians be carrying guns. I think that it's nothing like the issue, actually, that particular issue in the United States. I think it's much more problematic here. And there, I think it's more of a social situation. You
mentioned that being an issue that's hotly contested. I know the blockading of neighborhoods is as well. That's something that they've been talking about. In New York City, the mayor, Bill de Blasio, is on his way to Israel for a 3-day visit. He's made a point, and this is getting a lot of attention, that he wants to meet with Palestinians while he's there as well, not just Israelis. And what we're seeing is a battle of opinions here. A prominent Arab American activist who has close ties to the mayor's administration put on Twitter a photograph of a small child throwing or clutching a rock in front of Israeli soldiers, and she labeled it the definition of courage. And a city councilman for Queens responded by saying, no, the definition of barbarism. Same picture, two very different points of view. Is that part of what is happening in Israel right now in the Middle East, that you can be looking at the same thing and interpret it two very different ways?
I think actually not. First, I think it's dangerous for American politicians who are unfamiliar with the terrain to insert themselves into which really amounts to a local issue in that part of the world. Secondly, violence is violence, no matter how you label it. And, I can say that if you're in a situation where someone is about to throw a rock at you, there's nothing courageous about it. I would say it's actually it's not maybe as cowardly as some of the failure to walk back from some of the comments that Palestinian Authority President Abbas has made, falsely claiming that that 13-year-old attacker actually was executed by Israelis.
And then we saw the video, of course, today where he's in a hospital and he's being fed.
I mean, he was executing a terrorist act, so that's the situation.
Do you think that Israelis who are dealing with the potential for a teenager to come at them with a knife at a bus stop,
right,
do they also have a sense of the abject poverty, the problems with education, the problem of youth unemployment that the Palestinians are undergoing?
First, I would say, and as someone who is an American-Israeli citizen, the abject poverty, again, I think it's important to resist the cliche. A lot of Palestinians, especially in the West Bank, are doing quite well, and a lot of that is due to great economic cooperation with Israel. And a lot of those hardworking Palestinians are going to suffer because of the violent acts of a few, which results in tension and increased checkpoints and so forth.
Is it effective?
Are the checkpoints effective?
All of that, the fact that a lot of people suffer because of the actions of a few.
Of course, it's not fair, but it's not pleasant. But for the Israeli families and the Israeli Arab families that are also part of the picture, it complicates their lives. But you have a narrative which is so. Well, people talk about two narratives, but actually you have this atmosphere of incitement built up over the years, and you have a Palestinian education system which has largely failed its own youth, and that needs to change.
Listen, thanks for giving us the boots on the ground, so to speak, the face-to-face perspective of there, Tony. Thanks.